Today, I'm joined by a good friend of mine. I view as a champ of public speaking, 5-time author. Brandon, welcome to the podcast, man.
Oh, thanks so much. It's pretty cool being here. I lived here for a while before I spent much time in the mall. And now that I go to open mics on Wednesdays, I walk through the mall almost every Wednesday. And I would have never guessed that your studio was in this area of the mall.
Yeah, no, I like that it's like kind of hidden. A lot of the kids are trying to find me, and no, I just tell them you can't find me. And yeah, no, I like that. It's weird because like even just sitting here now, it doesn't even feel like we're in the mall. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of like forget that you're here. But yeah, no, how would you describe yourself to somebody who's never heard of you before?
I think that's a great question. So I'm a kid who likes chasing things. Like I'm a guy who just likes seeing something and then going for it. When I was younger, I really wanted to be a good golfer. Gave everything I had towards that, and then I found another passion, which was the fitness side of golf, and then I found another passion after that, which was personal development. And then in that personal development world, I found a nice niche with public speaking. So I'm someone who likes to go after things, and I think that's what life is for. If you just do the same thing every day, I think it gets a little boring.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mike Squires and Friends podcast. You can support by subscribing on YouTube or downloading on your preferred podcast platform. And definitely go do that because it helps us grow and I can have more incredible guests on the podcast. The Mike Squires and Friends podcast is proudly sponsored by DistroKid. Looking to broaden your musical horizons as an artist? Discover DistroKid. With its smooth and rewarding music distribution platform, DistroKid offers unlimited uploads while ensuring artists retain 100% of their royalties and earnings. Join the community of over 1 million artists who trust DistroKid to distribute their music across major platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, and so many others. Having personally used DistroKid since 2018, I can attest to their superiority amongst distribution services. Collaborating with fellow artists has become effortless, especially with the ability to easily send splits of songs, streamlining the creative process. With the DistroKid app, accessing these benefits is now more convenient than ever. Safely sign up or log in with 2-factor authentication, upload releases on the fly, monitor earnings, and withdraw funds from your DistroKid bank. Stay updated on royalties through push notifications, effortlessly share hyperfollow links, manage account details seamlessly, and track streaming stats from Spotify and Apple. Additionally, explore Mixia for professional-grade mastering, DistroVid for music video distribution, and Instant Share for secure file sharing with collaborators, producers, and more. The DistroKid app is available on both iOS and Android. Download it today from the App Store or Google Play Store to revolutionize your music career. Visit distrokid.com/VIP/Mike Squires to get 30% off your first year membership. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Mike Squires and Friends. No, that's fair, dude. And I think as you sit here, I'm trying to be more intentional with what I say, knowing your background in public speaking, because, you know, you're somebody I reached out to as a guidance with public speaking. And, you know, I want to get better at it, you know, and as you sit there, I'm like trying to steer the ship of me talking and like, you know what I mean? What are some of the first steps you can do to like be better at public speaking?
Yeah, so you know who Gary Vee is?
Of course, dude.
Okay, so I've been fortunate enough to have good conversations with his booking agents. And years ago, I said, hey, I'm working with a lot of these speakers. What would you tell them? And he said, Brandon, understand that every one of our 20 speakers on our rosters, they've produced with their business. He said, if you want to be a good speaker, it's important to produce. And when you produce with your business, or even an athlete, that I consider that a business as well. When you do something like that, all of a sudden it gives you stories that you can share that inspire people and that people can learn from. So if you're not doing something inspiring, it's hard to be a great speaker. So you've done a lot of inspiring things. So now it's thinking about, okay, how can I take those and allow people to start learning from them? And so I'll get to that in a second. The second thing that he said is you should get as much practice as possible sharing your message so that when you do get those dream opportunities, you're ready to go. And so podcasts is great. We're on a podcast right now. This is a great way to practice. I was on a virtual speaking engagement right before that. I look at that as a great opportunity to practice. And every time that you're doing that, you should have the ability to be able to look back at the footage, right? So if you're able to look back at the footage, you're able to find different things that you can do to be able to get better. A lot of people really harp on this. Oh, I use too many filler words like, and, so I wouldn't worry as much about that as learning how to look back at your footage and find the areas of opportunity to improve with the story. Because when you start telling the story a lot more, the ands, the uhs, the filler words, those start to get out of there. I think filler words is way overrated, because the more you tell a story, the more you'll be able to get those out of there. And so those are the three things that I would say. Do something inspiring, and then make sure you're getting as much repetition as possible. I've had over 600 speaking engagements. What qualifies as a speaking engagement? This right here, podcasts, virtual little mini group things, comedy, poetry, speaking in front of 5 people, speaking in front of 1,000 people. All of that, in my mind, is a speaking engagement. And so I've had over 600 of those. I could not speak like this at 1, at 40, at 100, at 300, at 500. Even from 500 to 600, I see how much I've improved. And it's just one of those things. I think a lot of people are too hard on themselves with not getting enough repetition. And so to touch on that even more, my conference that I had the last 4 years in Stamford called A to B Con, I brought my favorite comedian last year, Phil Hanley. And so Phil Hanley, he's not like a Kevin Hart comedian. The reason he's my favorite is because he does such a good job with crowd work. I've never laughed so hard than when I saw him perform at the New York Comedy Club in Stamford. And one of the things that he said when I interviewed him, I said, how long does it take to make it in comedy? He said, I never looked at it in terms of how long does it take to make it. I just wanted to know that I was getting better. And if I felt like I was getting better, I was going to keep going. But to push me to make sure I was doing the little things to keep better, I said, I'm going to get 1,000 shows. And I had this little tally mark. And every time he bombed, every time he did awful, every time he didn't want to get back up, he looked forward to going back to his little apartment and finding the sheet where he put the tallies on, one closer to 1,000. And so he sells out theaters now. Safe to say, it worked out for him. But imagine where you would be after 1,000, and at that time, I had done 39 different times doing comedy, mostly open mic, couple shows, and I did 39. I said, I can't even imagine where I would be when I got to 80, and now I'm at 80, and I see how much better I got from then. I can't imagine how much better I would get at 160 or 350 or 600 or 1,000, And I think a lot of people are too hard on themselves in the beginning days. But if you're doing number 2, getting as much repetition as possible, you're going to naturally get better. Now, if you want to get a lot better, then you do number 3, which is look over your footage. And that is one of the hardest things to do. People want to cringe their teeth. They want to turn the camera off. Some people with anger issues may want to just smash the footage, the chip, But when you can start looking at your footage, like Kobe Bryant looked at his footage to become a great basketball player, you find areas of opportunity to improve, whether it's comedy, whether it's storytelling. If you're a musician and you're looking back at how you're working the crowd in between songs, if you can look back at that, you find areas of opportunities to get better. And then the fourth thing is just understand that facts tell, stories sell. People don't want to be told what to do. They want to be inspired to do what they already need to do. No, they want to be inspired to do what they already know they need to do. And so if we can inspire people, then we can start to get them to take the action that we want them to take. If you can't hit pain points, if you can't relate to them, if you can't let them settle into how you got into a situation that you learned from, it's very hard for them to want to listen. You're not competing against other speakers nowadays. What you're competing against is a 6-inch object that people can put in their pockets. And whenever they're not paying attention to whatever you're saying, they can pull that thing out and get totally lost in time and spend the rest of their day on this phone. So those are the 4 things. Do something inspiring, and then make sure you get as much practice as possible, and then watch over the footage, and then understand that facts tell, stories sell.
Yeah. No, I think because as you were talking to, because I am somebody who does review the tape, right? And from my first podcast, I'm like just over 100 now. But my first one, like I know to like listen to my guests now. And before you'd hear like, yeah. And I'd be like, oh man, I like blew it. You know what I mean? On the first one. So now as I hear you talk, there are words that I have, like I say, dude, a lot. And I want to pull back from the amount of dudes that I say. And I still do it though. Even 100 episodes in, it's like, how do I pull back? And I guess it's just being more conscious of it, you know, until you break the habit.
Absolutely. And I could see that with what you were working on there. So I learned that from watching over my footage on podcasts. When I used to interview people, I would hear that. I would, yeah, oh, yeah. And it kills the momentum of the podcast when you listen back at it. So I saw you just sitting there patiently, kind of nodding your head, listening to the conversation. So I could actually tell that you worked on that. And that's something that I had to work on too. It didn't just I didn't naturally just understand it. I learned it from messing up on it and looking back at the footage.
What are some things that you used to do that you had to work on for public speaking?
I think one of the hardest things for me was I constantly thought that I had to bring value to people by telling them what to do. I always knew it was important to bring value to people, so I naturally thought I had to tell people what to do. And what a lot of people don't see is I started consistently posting videos in 2018. I was too embarrassed to post on my personal page, so I started the Warm Heart Life Instagram page, which
I want to talk to you about that, yeah.
Yeah, so which is my business. And in 2018, I took a speaker school, and I had asked the host, the guy who taught, I said, why do most people not get what they want? This is at the very end. I said, why do most people not get what they want? He said, most people don't get what they want. Most people won't get what they want. Most people will lay in bed at the end of their life with the look of regret on their face because they say they want something, they see something that they want, and then when one obstacle gets in the way, they shut it down and they don't go after it. He said, the reason most people don't get what they want is because they don't go after it fast enough. And so I was like, I was 25 at the time. I knew nobody was going to hire me to speak. I had just embarrassed myself for 3 days at this speaker school. And so I said, you know what? I can post videos, and that will allow me to work on a lot of what he taught throughout those 3 days. And so I said, I need to make 4 posts a week, and I want them to be mostly videos. If you go back over 7 years on the Warm Heart Life Instagram page, I'd be very surprised if you didn't see an average of at least 4 posts a week for 7 years. And many of those in the first 3 years were videos of me speaking. I didn't know lighting. I didn't even know what a tripod was. I used to take a chair, put it on the table, and then I would put my phone on the chair, and then I would stand against the wall so you could see my shadow there. I had no idea about lighting. I had no idea about microphones. All I knew is if I didn't do, I wasn't going to get better. And by committing to those 4 posts a week, I would get better and better. I started learning about lighting. I started learning about video editing. I started learning, like in the beginning days, I learned such a simple technique that was such a game changer. Whereas if you cut a part out of the video and it's a 1 camera shot and you zoom in, all of a sudden it doesn't look like you took that part out as much. If you have 2 cameras, it's much easier to make it look very smooth. And so I started learning these little things because I was doing it. And eventually I started to learn how to storytell in a way, which I can tell you the framework for that if you want.
Yeah, and I'd be curious, like, into that too.
Yeah, so I started to learn how to storytell, and that finally allowed me to start connecting with people, right? So if you look back for the first 3 or 4 years, you're going to see a lot of 60 views, 5 likes, 50 views, 4 likes, 75 views, 5 likes. You're going to see a lot of that. The only thing that kept me going was me committing to trying to get better every week. Not to how many likes I got, not to how many views I got, not to if I got a comment or not. I knew I needed to do if I was going to get better. And so many people, I see it at the comedy club all the time when I try and go to the open mics on Wednesday. I've been doing that it's starting to get close to 2 years, consistently going there. And I see comedians come in all the time. They come for a couple times and then you never see them again. And it's just, almost every Wednesday, I don't want to go to the open mic night. It's not the most exciting thing. You're going there, there's 5 to 15 people there. Most of them are comedians that could care less about what you have to say. Many of them have heard some of your jokes. Many of them would rather be facing in the opposite direction than listening to what you have to say. But I know I need to show up. I know I need to stay consistent if I'm going to get better. And every time I go after I'm done, I'm so glad that I got up there and did it. And because it puts pressure on me to get better. I have to have that 5-minute set. I have to think about it. I have to try and figure out how to make it better. And it pushes me, right? So I think that is one thing that I get frustrated with is people not practicing enough. So if you want to practice storytelling, there's 5 keys. First, you got to get people's attention. A lot of people call it a hook. I don't care what you call it. If you're not getting someone's attention, you got no shot of them listening to the video.
It's the most important part.
That's why I struggle with AI edits, because I don't think AI edits understand how important that first half a second is.
When you say AI edits, like taking a long form podcast like this and it just like automatically churning out an edit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, 1,000%, dude. Like there's a human touch and there's something that like, you know, I'm not going to say computers don't understand all the way, but like, you know, once you're in it long enough, you kind of like, oh, that'll work, that won't work, that, you know what I mean? So I understand what you're saying with that.
And when you've edited thousands of videos like both of us have, it's so hard to rely on an AI edit when they're missing so many things that keep it away from connecting with someone. And to really get a full story, you need these 5 things. And I don't think AI edits can really understand this. And that is, you need to get people's attention. You got 1 to 3 seconds to get people's attention. If you're on stage, you got about 3 seconds. If you're on social media, you got about 1 second to get someone's attention.
You got the distance of a swipe, man.
The distance of a swipe. I couldn't have worded it better than you there. You got the distance of a swipe to get someone's attention. And so everything needs to be taken into consideration. The visual, the first word, the camera angle, the lighting, all of that matters. Now, someone will say, well, this video went viral, it did this. Well, it probably still got people's attention, right? Everything doesn't have to be perfect to get people's attention. But these are things to take into consideration if you want to stick out in a overflooded market, right? And so commercials used to be a really big thing. Now all of a sudden, you can get commercials on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I mean, Google, like these commercials can pop up anywhere nowadays. So you're constantly competing to get people's attention. So if you can't get people's attention, you got no shot. Then second, we have to address the problem. So if we don't address the problem, it's hard to get people to want to listen to whatever the solution is. And so what is the problem? It's a pain point. What is the problem? It could literally just be a question that someone has. Hey, Mike, how do you film a podcast? That could be that could be an attention grabber in addressing the problem. One question I get asked all the time is, how do you film a podcast? So to film a podcast, this is what you call a boom. Then all of a sudden, you got the attention, you address the problem.
Yeah, adding value is like so important. That's like one of the things where it's like educational is like one of the pillar points.
Yeah. Versus if I say, if you want to film a podcast, here's what you have to do. It's not as engaging, right? You think, a lot of people think, okay, if you want to film a podcast, this is what you have to do. But it's not addressing the problem as much. When I started filming podcasts, I had no idea what microphone to get. Now all of a sudden, what? People are going to be a lot more interested in hearing about what microphone to get.
Yeah, no, because you're helping them out, like literally solving the problem that they have.
Exactly. And so many people are trying to skip the first 2 steps, which is getting the attention and then addressing the problem.
And you also build trust in that too.
You build trust. So another form of addressing the problem is to share something that's relatable. And when you share something that's relatable, all of a sudden trust starts to get built. So after you do those things, then we have to what? We have to make sure there's credibility. If there's no credibility, why in the world would someone want to listen to you? So you have a nice podcast, it looks good, it's clean, you get a good amount of views, so you have credibility there. So you may not actually have to say anything if you're addressing a question about how to have a podcast, right? Because you have that credibility. If you've never filmed a podcast, then you may want to say, one thing that I learned from Joe Rogan to make sure that you have a successful podcast is to ask your guests these 3 questions.
So you had the credibility, yeah.
So you see how we use Joe right there to add the credibility?
Yeah, and then it's all full circle because the way you get credibility is showing up and just get better at it, you know? So it's all connected, dude.
100%. You know, so if we're using the Joe example, now all of a sudden that person is interested to hear the question, right? We got the attention, then we addressed the problems, not sure what questions to ask, and then we added the credibility with the Joe Rogan in there. So now people are ready for the solution. Okay, what are the questions? They're on the edge of their seat. They're like drawing in. My mentor always used to call it the emotional bridge. He said, this is where you are. This is where you're trying to get them. The entire way you have a bridge, and your job is to keep them going on that bridge, right? If they lose focus, if they get distracted, then the emotional bridge all of a sudden cracks.
Yeah,
and they stop listening.
Tapping into emotions is important too, because I have a video series that I do. I basically post the same video over and over again, but I do a different hook. And basically, you know, from Connecticut. So Joe, and I bring this up because we were just talking about Joe Rogan, but Joe has a video where he religiously talks bad on Connecticut.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know that if I take the snippet of Joe Rogan talking terrible about Connecticut, people are going to engage, you know what I mean? Just because it, you know, having a strong opinion will get people's emotional response. But then once he does that, I'll flip it and be like, nah, you're wrong, Joe Rogan, and this is why Connecticut's great. And then I'll play like my video. So being able to tap into like emotional, it's a huge part of it, dude, you know? And it's like, but stand by your guns and keep it authentic to you.
100%, you know, and when you show that clip of Joe, it hits a problem, you know, saying that Connecticut's not good because of this, this, and this. And then boom, you tap right into why there is credibility in Connecticut and then the solution why it's the best place to live, which I agree. I think I always tell people, I say, Stamford, Connecticut is my favorite town in the world. Stamford, Connecticut is a dream come true to live in. Stamford, Connecticut is a place full of opportunities. Stamford, Connecticut is a place filled with community. Stamford, Connecticut is a place for people raising a family, people who are just getting out of college, people who want to be a professional that works in New York City and commutes. Stamford, Connecticut is a dream town for people to live in. And whenever people talk negatively about it, I said, you're talking to the wrong person. Because I will talk about this town in the highest way for as long as you want to talk.
You're on the right podcast, dude.
Yeah.
You're saying this to the right guy, dude. I mean, I love Stamford, you know. I have had to defend Stamford in the past, and I get upset, bro. Like, anybody who talks down on it, like that, you know, there's very few things in life that get me upset. But if you're talking down on Stamford, that is like something that like enrages me. I don't know if you remember the Arthur meme from back in the day where he'd like have his fist clenched.
Oh.
But that's like, dude, I've gotten into fights over like with people over it because I just love this place, you know. But you know, let's touch on that real quick. Like, what's some of your favorite things? Like, just from how long have you been out here too?
So I was living in. I had an interesting journey leading up to coming to Stanford.
Let's go through this. Actually, let's pull it back a little bit. Let's go through this journey and let me know how you got here, man. Because I'm curious on this story.
Absolutely. So when I was in high school, I had incredible parents, but the one thing that I really wanted to learn was social life. My parents had very big families, both sides, so a lot of their friends were family oriented. And one thing that I always struggled with was how to really like be a good friend, but also meet new people. I just always struggled with that growing up. So when I went to college, I wanted to go kind of far away where I had to like figure things out. You know what I mean? And so I went to North Carolina, a small school down there. And one of the main reasons I went, and one of the main reasons why my dad was okay with me not going to a SUNY school, because I grew up in New York, and if you go to a SUNY school, it's a lot cheaper. One of the reasons he agreed to let me go down to North Carolina is because I went to school for golf management, and there was no accredited schools in New York. So it didn't make sense for me to go to a non-accredited school, because then I would have had to go another 2, 3, 4 years to get the certification that I was going to get in school. And so what ended up happening is I went down to this place in North Carolina, a small school called Methodist University, but massive golf program. And the reason my dad was okay with it, besides that accreditation, is we got to do an internship each summer. So I said, if I get to do an internship each summer, I am going to go near the water every single summer. And I'm going to go to some of the coolest places that you could possibly imagine. So I went to Rumson, New Jersey my first summer, which is like where Bruce Springsteen lives, right on the water of the Jersey, like the very nice part of the Jersey Shore. Second summer, I went to Cape Cod.
Yeah, Cape Cod's great.
And then third summer, I went to Boston, Massachusetts. Imagine Boston in the summer when you turn 21.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fun. I love Boston, too.
Yeah. So, and then the last one, I went to Palm Beach, and that was a 7-month internship.
Oh, yeah. You were living life out there, dude.
And I got to live right off of Worth Avenue, because the golf course was right there, and they had housing there. And if you don't know what Worth Avenue is, picture Greenwich Avenue, but even higher.
Insane, dude.
And so, yeah, you would drive down this street, and a Land Rover would look like a cheap car. And so I would meet a lot of people who lived in Greenwich down there. So in Palm Beach, a lot of people live in the Greenwich, the Stamford, the New York City area. So that's how I started hearing about Greenwich. And I was looking for a place that I could keep my golf pro certification but do fitness, because I was in the golf side of fitness. And so the only place I could find was in Greenwich, Connecticut. And so I found a place that had an indoor golf facility that would let me do personal training. And what happens when you live in Greenwich is, and you're 22 years old, you kind of have to figure out where to go out, and there's people your age. And Greenwich, I was not finding that. So I started going to Stamford, and I just fell in love with at the time it was Brother Jimmy's. I loved going to Brother Jimmy's. You would just meet so many people. And I was like, this town is pretty cool. So I went to the Live at Fives in 2016, first year I was living around here. And I saw some of the most beautiful girls that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I said, you know what? This is an incredible town, and this is an even more incredible event, because I was blown away by the thought of being able to put 8,000 people into the streets of Stamford for an event.
That's great. Do you remember who the artist was?
Third Eye Blind.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, Third Eye Blind. There was about 2,000 people that couldn't get in that day. And I think they could fit 8,000. I could be off with those numbers, but those were the numbers I was hearing around. And so I said, I would love to meet the person who runs this, and maybe I could learn from them. So I reach out to the people who were in charge of the Alive at 5, and this lady, Lynn, who was kind of the head of that at the time, I believe she retired now.
She retired last year, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so she said, sure, come on in. I'll let you meet with this other lady too, and you can talk with the both of us. So I got to kind of hear two different sides of it. And at the end, Lynn goes, Brennan, it's great that you ask these questions, and I hope you learn from this. But if you really want to learn, you're going to have to get your feet wet. You're going to have to put your feet in the water.
If you want to. Do your own event?
Yeah, well, no. She's like, you're going to have to put your feet in the water if you really want to learn. And so I said, well, what do you mean?
Yeah, because I'm curious too.
Yeah. And she said, I think you should come intern for us.
Oh, amazing, dude.
And so I was like, all right, I think I could do that because I was full-time personal trainer and it's commission only. So I was kind of in control of my schedule. And I said, all right, like I'm interested. So I still had to apply though. That the head of the Alive at 5 said you should come intern for us. I still had to apply. So I apply and the head of the internship program says, hey, I'm sorry, everybody is coming back from the last year. We don't have room for you. And I said, okay, like this is interesting.
Yeah, it's mad funny. Cause like in your eyes, it was like their suggestion. So then you did it. And you're like, oh, all right.
Yeah. So I said, well, listen, like I don't really care about the money. I just want to learn. That's what Lynn said, to put my feet in the water. And I want to learn how to do more. I want to learn how to swim. And so he says, I just don't like, we just don't got room. So I literally walked into the office right over there, walked into the downtown Stamford office, and the guy's name was Frank. I said, hey, I was just curious, can I talk to Frank? I'm interested in interning here. And the lady at the front, she's like, he's in a meeting right now. Sorry, can I take a message? I said, no message needed. I'll just sit here till he's ready. Have you ever played poker and you like,
Yeah.
and so I had no idea what was going to be said, but I just sat there, and thank God, like 20 minutes later, he comes out. He says, oh, hey, Brandon, how's it going? And I said, hey, it's going pretty good. This was never about the money. I just really want to learn. He said, well, maybe we can let you do the one that we're expecting the least amount of people to come. That way I could spend some time with you. You could learn a little bit.
Less chaotic.
Yeah, less chaotic. And I said, that's great. I really appreciate that. But I want it all. Like I'm
either in or I'm out.
I'm either in or, yeah. And I said, I would love to do all of them, and I don't need to get paid. And meanwhile, at the time, I think I was making close to 6 figures. So it was just like, I don't know what minimum wage was back then, $11 or whatever. It just, the money didn't matter to me. And so I was like, I just want to learn. So he says, okay, all right. He said, show up next week at 11 o'clock on Thursday. So at the time, it was 4 Wednesday events. They were in the middle, weeks 2 through 5. And then in the beginning, it was the Thursday one. And then at the very end, it was the Thursday one. So there was 10 of them. It was much, I know they don't have them anymore, but it was much different than the later years. So I said, okay, I'll be there. I show up at 11 a.m. and I was so pissed because they had already been working for an hour. And I said, so you told me 11 a.m. He said, I know, but like you're doing this voluntarily. I didn't want you to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. I was so pissed because now I look like I show up an hour late to everybody else, which, by the way, nobody else cared, but I cared.
You, yeah.
I cared. And so I said, ain't nobody going to work harder than me today. Nobody going to work harder than me today. And meanwhile, the guy who was running the setup and everything, he 100% worked harder than me. That guy was a machine. But that was my mentality. I was like, nobody's going to work harder than me today. And so I got there at about 11. Meanwhile, I probably had 3, 4, 5 personal training sessions before I went there. It got to about 10:30 at night when we finally, because at the time we used to have to carry the fences, set them up to block off the street.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of our job. So we got done carrying the fences, and Lynn goes, hey, we're going to go out to dinner at Columbus Park. Do you want to join us? I said, oh, yeah, that would be great. So I go out to dinner with a bunch of them after. There was probably 15, 20 people there. And Lynn goes, I talked to Frank, and we're going to pay you.
Oh, let's go, dude. Bro, what a great story, man. It gets me excited, dude. And just to show that showing up is half the battle sometimes, dude. And like, there's a respectful way of not taking no for an answer. And I think that's like the best way to do it. Because, I feel like I'm somebody who doesn't take no for an answer, but you don't want to be the guy that like, there's an art to it, So you just don't want to be the guy that's like pushing no and then getting like aggressive. I think you played that perfectly. So then how did that relationship like transpire over the years?
Incredible. I mean, I don't even know if Lynn would remember me now, but she was a tremendous mentor to me over the next 5 years. And just in little bouts, I think a lot of people think that a mentor is someone that you spend a ton of time with. Lynn was a game changer to me understanding how to do events. And so what happened is the next year I reached out to her and I believe we had lunch. And I told her about my vision for potentially having an actual event. Because at the time I was really interested in helping up and coming musicians. I had studied Scooter Braun a lot, who took Justin Bieber on tour, kind of made him famous.
Out of Greenwich too.
Out of Greenwich. I had studied him quite a bit. And to be honest with you, I had a great mentor who I was his backup personal trainer. He is the COO of Time Warner Records.
Insane.
So I get to talk to him all the time, and he was so helpful to the development of my mindset in my mid-20s. Like, he taught me how to get a raise. He taught me how to stick out. That's one of the benefits of personal training, especially around here, is you meet a lot of very successful people. And he just gave me so much advice about how to get your foot in the door. In fact, I don't even know if I would have followed through on that story right there if it wasn't for him talking to me about how important it was to get your foot in the door. And so I had a lot of inspiration towards helping up and coming musicians. And so that's where I really wanted to focus. So I told Lynn about my idea for having an event, and she said, Brandon, well, if you really want to do it, then just do it.
It's great advice.
So she kind of told me the ins and outs of things to look at as far as contract wise and stuff like that. And so in 2019, I had my first musician showcase night, and it was at—
What did that look like? Yeah.
It was at Garcia's, at where the Capitol Theater is in Port Chester, right on the border. So the Capitol Theater has a mini venue that can fit like 200 people called Garcia's, named after Jerry Garcia. And so I rented that out on a Tuesday night because it was cheaper. And that's where I did that first event. I had 4 musicians. They each had probably 15 to 20 minutes. And it was a lot of fun.
Any musicians I know?
Probably not. I mean, you might. Like, we had one guy who made Celine Dion cry when he was on The Voice. He was—
Oh, that's cool though.
He was like
Cool
top 10 on The Voice. And then we just had we had really cool people. Yeah. And that was in 2019. I had a successful turnout, but I lost money on the event because I didn't know anything about selling tickets or—
That's basically the whole music industry, dude. You just like spend money, learn, spend money, learn, spend money, learn, make a little bit of money, spend money, learn, spend money, learn. Yeah.
100%. So I was so excited to give it another shot. You know, even though the event looked successful, I messed up with a lot of pictures and videos and opportunities to really
elevate it. And also, I just didn't know a lot about negotiation, finance, like just with the artist, with the venue, all that. Like, I just didn't know a lot of this stuff. So it was like kind of like they gave their price and like you just were like, okay, that's what it is kind of thing.
Back then, I don't remember. I'm sure I had like a set price. It's not like I paid them that much, but they appreciated the pay. I mean, I probably paid anywhere from $150 to $300.
Oh,
yeah. You know, which you're not going to find many up and coming musicians that don't appreciate that, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I was ready to do it again. I went into the Garcias to get the contract kind of in the beginning of March. And then I started hearing buzz about the pandemic. And so I just was like, okay, let me hold off on handing in the contract. Because I was set on doing it again until I started hearing the buzz about this. And I was like, let me wait a week.
Bro, yeah, what a crazy thing. I wanted, like, the pandemic was a crazy time.
Yeah.
We could obviously talk about the roller coaster of emotions that happened there. Dude, I was locked in for tour.
Yeah.
And I was on the road when the pandemic hit. Just crazy times. But where are we at? Yeah, no, there's a lot I want to cover, dude. So because I refuse to bring you on the podcast and not talk about you being an author. You know what I mean? So you have 5 books out.
Yeah, 5 books.
Walk me through them real quick, dude. If like, and you know, which one was the first one that we started out on, and you know, what made you want to keep going?
So Jim Rohn is a guy who many people in the personal development world know. He died, I believe, in 2009. I could be off on that, but I'm almost positive. But yeah, his messages have lived on for many, many years, including this current day and time. In the personal development world, there's not a lot of people who don't know who he is, right? And he talks about how important it was to leave your legacy behind through writing and through speaking. And so I always wanted to get a lot of the stuff that a lot of mentors had taught me into books, into videos, into ways where if I was not here anymore, people could still learn from me. And so the first one was a golf fitness book. That was my first career. So I put together the ultimate in-home golf fitness program, and it was a 12-week program. Then I told my mentor, I said, I want to write personal development. I just have had so many great mentors that have taught me so many incredible things. I learned a lot from bar conversations. I started meeting so many people at the bars. We get into these deep conversations, and I would learn from my peers. You know, I would learn so much from their experiences, from them sharing stories. So I said, I want to write a personal development book. So the second one was The Care Principle, Creating a Life That Makes a Difference to the World Under 30. And the picture for that book was actually my hand on my heart presenting at Musician Showcase Night. So I thought that was funny how that turned into the picture for that. So that got released right after the transition of the decade. So I think January 2020, that got released. And then when the pandemic hit, my mentor said, hey, it's important to be there for your people. So I started voluntarily mentoring high school and college students through a structured program. It wasn't like, hey, give me a call and I'll help out. It was a structured 5 to 8 week program. I tested it out many different ways between 5 to 8 weeks. And they would meet with me twice a week for 60 minutes. So I started to figure out what they needed, the questions that they had. And one of the things that I would teach was public speaking. I would teach going out of your comfort zone. I would teach writing an email to make you stick out so that someone wants to meet you. I would teach them interview skills. And so I turned that whole 2 years into a book called Skip College, Read This. And then after I put that out, I decided to have a conference in Stamford. I knew I wanted to switch from helping musicians to more so the education system and helping people kind of understand how to take action on their dreams. I know that kind of sounds simple, but and it starts with education. I think from 17 to 23, and then you could also stretch that to I think 26. People are the most open to learning and seeing different sides of life. So I had an event called Map Your Way to Financial Freedom, which eventually got turned into the name A to B Con. And after Map Your Way to Financial Freedom, my mentor said, I think you should start teaching public speaking. He said, I think you're on to something here. So a couple months later, I decided to call the best speaker I knew in the area, Carl Michelle, who made his living speaking in the New York City school system. I said, do you want to teach a speaker school? He said, sure, let's do it. So he had this place called the Royal Communication Center at the time, and we started doing it there. And now we're over 4 years into that, and I've taught 37 speaker schools all over the country. And I turned another book into how to become a phenomenal public speaker. And then my fourth book was the ultimate 12-week golf fitness program, and it was a book I put out there before I retired.
Yeah, let's go, dude. Yeah. No, it's sick too. It gets me excited because one thing that I just am learning more about you, like I knew you were a go-getter and somebody who, like a stand-up guy, because, you know, when we did the citywide cleanup, that's kind of what I looked for the people that I was helping kind of just like lead different areas. So, you know, and you had a good reputation, like people recommended you highly, but, you know, hearing you talk and how you just bring things to fruition, bring it to life, you know, to have something like tangible, because I know a lot of people in my life that have been talking about writing a book forever. And then you're standing in front of me with 5. You know what I mean? So it really is important just to do the thing. And, you know, what's something that you learned from writing your first book to your last one?
There's a lot of ways I can go with this. So I want to make sure to inspire, but also not totally defeat people's idea of writing a book. So I learned this from a mentor. I worked for a guy in the fitness industry. He was, in my mind, the number one guy in that industry. So he took 25 interns the summer I was there. So just give you a picture how big this place was. He won a World Series with the Red Sox as their strength and conditioning consultant the year prior to me going there. And this guy wrote many books. And he was one of my inspirations to start writing. He said that the funny thing about writing a book is a year or 2 after you write it, you want to change a lot of the stuff in it. So I always thought that was interesting. And now that I've written 5, I see what he's talking about. That's why my first book and my 4th book was almost like a newer edition. I didn't call it a new edition, but that's pretty much what it was. And you could see how much better that one was versus the other one. So I think one of the biggest things I learned is that the best way to become a better writer, the best way to understand how to write books that people will actually read, is to actually just focus on consistently doing it. So I was able to write 5 books because I committed to doing it once a day. And out of 365 days, did I do it 365 days? Probably not. Did I do it probably close to 340? Probably. And some days was a sentence, some days was a paragraph. Some days I was locked in for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Some days I was learning how to do a book cover. And so it's one of those things that when you focus on consistency, all of a sudden you can get the final product. Like how to become a phenomenal public speaker was tough because I was going to write a personal development book that wasn't clicking. I had written the whole book, tried to rewrite it, and it wasn't clicking. And so I said, you know what? I think I can be the number 1 public speaking coach in the world. So why don't I just write a book on what I'm really good at?
What made you realize it wasn't clicking?
I just didn't. I wanted to do it on mentorship, and I wanted to do it on kind of helping people understand how to learn from the best people in the industry. And I think I was just trying to put too much in there versus just when I switched it to how to become a phenomenal public speaker, it was just a niche that I knew what people wanted to hear.
It kind of goes back to our content conversation where it's like it solves a problem.
Solves a problem, and it's just one of those things that because I wrote that, I knew that I needed to write something else. And it's kind of like, you're in the music world, so you know this more than me, but I love studying musicians. And so often I hear about someone writing an album and they put 14 songs out, but yet there was 30, 40 songs that were written, that were recorded, that didn't make the album, which I always thought was fascinating. You know what I mean? And I think with writing, that's one of the biggest keys. My mentor taught me, he said, Brandon, the key with writing is you write 800 pages, you cut that down to 400, and then you cut the 400 down to 300.
That is a good strategy. Yeah.
So it's the same thing with video editing. I'm sure it's very similar with music, just cutting out the parts that don't connect with people, you know?
It's funny too, because even with I posted a video today. I made 4 different versions of that video to like just watch them and see like what was hitting and like what I would start with. And, you know, thankfully, you know, when you talk about like social media, like Instagram implemented a thing, trial reel. So it's like, it actually gives you the opportunity to like try all of your different versions of the video so you can see how it implements. But like, you know, with a book, it's kind of like once it's out there, it's like, you know, I don't know if people, maybe that's the future. Like, are people going to start retroactively like tweaking their books? Like,
can.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
I can literally take my book from 4 years ago and I could switch the manuscript on it.
Yeah.
Amazon allows you to do that. I mean, they still have to approve it, but yeah, you can submit a book through Amazon, and then if there's a typo in there or a change you want to make, then you can actually submit a new manuscript, and within 48 to 72 hours, anyone who orders that book, now all of a sudden we'll get that version.
That is cool. We're kind of going to the end zone now.
Sure.
I got to talk to you about Warm Heart Life. You know, how did this all come together? And, you know, I mean, what's the story behind it?
Yeah. So when I was 20 years old, I was the guy who would go to class and I would go forehead right to the desk. Like I hated the idea of learning things that I didn't see an applicableness to the real world. Hated it. I'm doing all these internships where I'm just learning so much about customer service, taking care of people, way to stick out, how to take initiatives. I'm talking to these people. Like I caddied for the guy who owned the Houston Texans. Like he started I got to spend 4 hours with that guy. I got to spend 2 hours one-on-one with the guy who sold Joseph A. Banks. Like it's just, I'm talking to all these people on the internships. I'm learning so much on the go. And then in school, I'm sitting there and they're just teaching me information that I see no application to
cultural
what was
anthropology, bro. No, I hear you, dude. Like every time as you're talking right now, I relate to your sentiment very heavily.
So I would just, it wasn't even a disrespect thing. It was just, I was hoping one teacher would just say, why does that kid have his head down? And it's like, because I don't see an application to this, not because I disrespect you, not because you're a bad teacher. It's because the way that we are being taught in school, I just don't see a lot of correlation to the real world. And that was a big frustration of mine. So when I was 20 years old, I had to go to a mandatory seminar at school. And of course, the last thing I wanted to do was be there. What was funny is my roommate got in a car accident on the way there. He was okay. His car was not, and he did not go to the seminar. I constantly think about if I got in the car accident and didn't go to this seminar and he got to go to this seminar, if our lives would have been any different. And he's got a good life, not saying anything otherwise, but this night was a game changer for me because for the first time I heard someone teach in a way that got me excited to learn and take action. And so this guy comes in, he was in his mid-60s. Of course, I just naturally go towards the back. I'm like, all right, nap time's here. And so he started talking about how he wanted to be the best in the world at what he did when he was younger. And then he just shared stories about what he did to be eventually known as one of the best, highly regarded as one of the best. And what was cool is all he did was he wrote down a list of 10 people that were the best in his mind. And then he focused on learning, observing, shadowing, studying, and meeting those 10 people. So what do? I write down my top 10 list for golf fitness professionals because that's what I was interested in. 3 weeks later, I'm on the phone with the number 3 guy on my list. He tells me every single thing I need to do to be successful in that field. What do? I do what he told me to do. 6 years later, I get nominated top 50 in America as a golf fitness professional by Golf Digest, which Golf Digest, if you're in that world, is like the top of the top, right?
How did that feel?
Pretty damn good. And so I'm 26 years old at that time, and I get voted top 50 in America, youngest person on that list. You would think I would be on cloud 9, and it did feel great. But at the same time, I looked back at the last 9 years that I had been pursuing golf fitness, and I felt very lonely. I felt very unfulfilled. And I said, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? Now, I was not just going to cold turkey quit that right there because I was peeking at it. I was getting opportunities that were coming in from all over. Like the guy who owns the Louis Vuitton brand, his son reached out to me about potentially training together. Like it was crazy the people that were starting to connect with me just from the credibility that I had in that field. But I just wasn't really that fulfilled. And so I said, if I'm going to climb another mountain, I know it's probably going to take at least 10 years to climb that. What do I want it to look like differently from the first time to the next time? And I said, the biggest thing I want is I want to grow together with people along the way. I want other people to climb the mountain with me so they can feel the frustrations, the highs, the lows. We can work through the roadblocks together. We can build bridges over those situations. And if I can do that, I think I'm going to have more fun along the way, which will directly correlate to enjoyment with the process. People always say enjoy the process, but that's a little bit more of a situation that I was thinking to enjoying the process. And so what ended up happening is I say, I can't change the world, but a warm heart that touches other hearts, that those hearts touch other hearts, maybe we could collectively change the world. And so I said, if I can get around enough warm hearts, maybe we could do something special. So I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have a product. I didn't have a service. This was in 2018. I started my business and it was called Warm Heart Fitness and Entertainment because fitness is where I was starting to get some people working with me on the side. And so I called it Warm Heart Fitness and Entertainment, knowing that I wanted to pursue this personal development side. But doing the fitness and the personal development in one business, it wasn't clicking with people. Like people couldn't get it, and I understand why. So when I had the musician showcase night, I decided to branch it off into Warm Heart Life and then Warm Heart Fitness. And so that's how Warm Heart Life started. And then a couple years after that, in 2021, I was at a conference in Florida. It was called the 10X Exit. So it was getting you thinking about the exit of your business. And at that time, I didn't really have much of a vision besides the whole +1, the warm heart concept. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to go after this business, I want to think big. If I'm going to think about the exit, I want to think big. So I just took $1 billion and I said, let me break down $1 billion. And I came up with 100,000 and 10,000. And then I said, if I can get 100,000 people paying me 10,000 for the year, that's $1 billion in revenue. And at that time, I was mentoring high school and college students voluntarily, and I was very passionate about the education system. So I said, you know what? If I can have 10 different universities with 10,000 students, I can write off a private plane and I could spend time in my favorite cities in America. And I can impact people, I can impact teachers, and we can create the leaders that could potentially allow our nation to succeed.
Influence it. Well, previously Mike Stud, now Mike. He had influence on your whole operation.
Yep. So Mike Stud, who goes by Mike, had a huge influence on my life. He was talked about in college. One of my buddies loved him. He was from Connecticut. And he's like, oh, there's this guy who chugs a bottle of vodka or something at the end of his shows. And we would watch the YouTube video. And so I had heard about him then, and I went to school near Duke, which is where he went to school. He was a little older than me, but we just would hear the buzz because he was just out of college when we were in college. And so I started studying Mike, and then as I got a little older, I watched his documentary from, I think, 2016, the tour that they went on. And I was blown away how this guy wasn't signed by a label, but he was touring around the country. But I saw in that documentary how much he was focused on connecting with other people. He was doing the after parties. He was taking the pictures. He was talking to them after. And so I said, if I can connect with people, maybe I can start to create some sort of a following that allows me to do the things I want to do. And honestly, I can't believe it. We've gone to Laguna Beach, California 3 years in a row for a speaker school. This will be our third year going to Miami Beach, going to Greece this year to teach one out there, going to Atlanta this year, went to a resort in Bedford Springs the last couple of years. I can't even tell you how many we've done in Stamford off the top of my head. And it's amazing. I've done a comedy special 3 years in a row.
I gotta come see you do comedy, dude. I need to. It's on every Wednesday you're at the open mic?
Yeah.
I need to.
Yeah. Make sure to come to the comedy special when it all gets tied together.
Yeah, no, I'd love to.
And I owe Mike a lot of that credit for showing someone like me what is possible when you don't wait on other people to create your dream. And so I have this vision, and I owe Mike a lot of credit for this. I have this vision that with the universities on Fridays, there's one class, and that one class on Friday is called Fired Up Friday. Instead of the students going to watch a basketball game, they go to this arena, and there's a stage set up, and on that stage is someone who's gone after some inspiring stuff, who shares their stories to these students, who inspires them to go after their dreams, who inspires them to see what's possible. And I'm hoping a lot of those speakers are people like you who grew together with me along the way.
Yeah, bro. When I hear you talk, all I think about is Brandon is a take action kind of guy, dude. And I really commend you for it, because there's a lot of people that don't do it, dude. They talk about it. They won't go sit and wait for the person to be done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I love hearing these stories, man. And so I'm going to pull this to the end zone now, and I'm going to ask you a question I ask everybody.
Sure.
If you had one message, like, for the world, anything, you know what I mean? Like, what would be your message to the world?
If tomorrow wasn't to come for you, would you be okay with what you left behind? So if you were not able to wake up in the morning, would you be happy with what you left behind? And if the answer is no, then what can you do tomorrow that can help you take strides to being the person that you would like to be when you're no longer here anymore? And so for me, I started with writing. And then after writing, I started with videos. And after a while, I started to learn how to become a better speaker, how to become a better storyteller. And now if I was to not wake up tomorrow, I would have content that could be spread for years, many, many years. If I was to not wake up tomorrow, I would have books with concepts from a lot of the mentors that I've learned from, what they taught me, so other people can learn from them. And I would have people, this is the thing that I appreciate the most, I would have people that have learned from me that would continue my teachings for decades and decades and decades, like I am doing for a lot of the mentors who have helped shape my perspective in life.
I think that's a great perspective to have. And I think out of all 100 podcasts I have had on here, nobody has said anything like that. And I love that, dude. So I guess it's time, Brandon. I guess it's time. I want to just thank you for coming on the podcast. I feel like I could talk to you forever, though. That's why, I think we've run it for like an hour, but I know that you have so many more stories and everything, and I really enjoy you sitting here with me today. But I hope people will take this podcast and learn a lot from it too.
And thank you for what you're doing for the town of Stamford, Connecticut. I love the sense of community that you have been able to help bring people together, get people excited about this town. I always love seeing when you and PJ do stuff together. I think you guys are two just great advocates for Stamford. PJ actually hopped on one of my calls back in, I believe, 2021 to talk to the high school college students that I used to mentor.
Oh, amazing. Yeah,
Yes.
PJ's he's been like a huge mentor to me too. And I think, it's funny, a lot of people always ask me, like, do I work for Hey Stanford? And I work with him on a lot of things, but just huge. He's my sensei. Every time that I'm kind of, even through Macy's, everything, I'm always going to him. I'm like, hey, this is kind of where we're at. What do you think I should do? So he's been, I owe a lot to PJ.
Yeah. So he's seen Walmart life from the pretty beginning days, and I just appreciate what you're doing for this town to help bring people together. And I can't wait to see what comes from you inspiring other people to talk highly about this town.
Man, thank you. Bro, it's been a crazy year. I'm just grateful to be here, man. But thank you. And, just trying to keep it positive, trying to keep it light. And yeah, Brandon, if people want to connect with you and find you, how can they?
So Brandon Gaydorus, pretty much any social media. Luckily, my last name is not one that many people have. So fortunate enough there. And then 607-348-6136 is my phone number. You can call me, text me. People always say, oh, why would you share that? It's like, listen.
You are the first person to share your phone number on this podcast. And as you said your phone number, I did think, why would he share that a little bit?
It's a good problem to have if too many people are calling your phone.
I'm just praying that the kids that watch my stuff are not blowing you up, dude.
It's funny. They're at the beer garden, they used to have Jenga blocks where you would write a dare at the end.
Yeah.
And one time we actually called the person that had said to call in there, And it was this couple that was right at the front row of a concert that looked like it had 10,000 plus people there.
That's actually so funny, dude.
And they knew what it was. They knew it was from the beer
They
garden.
knew for the Jenga block?
Yeah.
That's mad funny,
And
dude.
so I wrote my name on there. And over the years that I was there, I had a couple people reach out, and one
From
of
the
them
Jenga block?
from the Jenga block, and one of them I actually went on a blind date with.
That's what they say. Dang, we're gonna have to have you back, Brandon. We're gonna have to have you back. I know you have more stories too. That's why it kills me to end the pod, but I gotta keep it to the format, dude. Well, thank you for coming on, dude.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.